Good morning and welcome to this month's edition of Oak Hill Regional Community Development Corporation's third Wednesday Parent Resource Chat. As you know, my name is Bettina Campbell and I'm your host again today. I'm also a Medicaid CHIP sister and an Oak Hill Regional Community Development Corporation's Social Service Coordinator. We have with us also this morning Sister Lottie Ann Miner, who serves as the project director for Oak Hill Regional Community Development Corporation, and Mr. Thomas Robertson, who is our technology director, and he's helping us with technology today. We recognize our board chair, Jennifer Garrett, and our executive director, Dr. Michael O. Miner. In addition to this Zoomcast, we're restreaming today's webinars on the Oak Hill Regional CDC and Healthy Kids Mississippi's Facebook pages. So please feel free to share your social media pages. This month, we have an emphasis on many national health awareness days, as most months. This month, we are looking at things such as National Autism Awareness, Child Abuse and Neglect, National Public Health Awareness, National Minority Health Awareness, National Donate a Life Awareness, and National World Health Day. And these are all very worthy causes. But of those causes today on this program, we have chosen to talk about child abuse and neglect and the autism spectrum disorder. And to do that, we have with us two very knowledgeable and very special ladies. And they're going to talk to us today, talking about childhood neglect and abuse, will be Pastor Sharon Sattler. And for the autism spectrum disorder, we have Mrs. Anita Fields Norsworthy. So I want to say thank you, ladies, for agreeing to be with us today and welcome. So before we get started, as usual, I'm going to share just a little bit about the presenters. I'm going to start with Pastor Sattler, who will do her presentation first, and then we will have Sister Anita Bealsworthy do hers. So just a bit about Pastor Sattler. She has a master's teaching degree, and she has 36 years of experience. She has received numerous city and state awards for teaching, for her teaching skills, and an original curriculum that she wrote called the Homeschool Program, which has been implemented in over 45 cities and states, and also In West Africa, in Nigeria, West Africa, the government implemented her program there. Sharon works today with the Flint Odyssey House, where she's working with families who are recovering from substance use or misuse. And she also works on their strength. She's a lead teacher for their Strengthening Families program. She is the principal of Freedom School, the original Afrocentric empowerment program in school that was founded by Dr. E. Hill Deloney there in Flint, Michigan. And she's the author of an educational workbook called, how do you pronounce it, Sharon? Huyu. And
Huyu.
it's a nonviolent education for today's youth. And it's awesome. I've had an opportunity to read the book and to see the work in progress. And guess what, y'all? It's so awesome that it was presented to President Barack Obama by Dr. Martin Luther King's family. And finally, but not least, Sharon is associate pastor at the Bethlehem Apostolic Church in Flint, Michigan. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you.
Mrs. Beals Norsworthy, which is a mouthful that I always get confused with, but she is a licensed professional counselor for the state of Mississippi. She received her undergrad degree from the University of Southern Mississippi, a master's from the Mississippi State University, and she has worked in mental health for over 23 years. She is the founder of owner of Best Day Ever Consulting Services, and it's an LLC here in Mississippi. And she's a dedicated individual committed to holding God's unchanging hand. Anita states that she strongly believes that life challenges are overcome by faith in knowing and believing that God can calm any storm that arises in your life. And she's also a devoted mother, a proud mother and grandmother. Welcome, Anita. So before I turn it over to you, Sharon, I did want to make sure that everybody get a pencil and paper so that you can take down notes that you can use later, but also that you can also take down any questions that you might have that you're going to ask us, because after Anita's presentation, we will open up for questions and answers. And I also want you to remember to share your social media and be a blessing to somebody today. So share this webinar across your social media platforms. Okay, thank you again for joining us today. And I'm excited. I know you have so much to share with us, a wealth of knowledge. And so let's get started. Sharon?
Well, I want to say good morning to all of the wonderful listeners and watchers of this important program. And I want to say that child abuse and neglect, I would call it a national tragedy. And looking at the statistics, it covers all economic, racial, ethnic groups. It's just a tragedy that touches probably everyone that you can know, all of our families, all of our loved ones, but people we do not know as well. And so together, I really believe that as we look at this and look at the statistics, there is something that we could do to help. Today, I would like to provide you with definitions of child abuse and neglect. I would like to present some data to you regarding child abuse and neglect. I'd like to share with you some signs of abuse and neglect, and then finally, present some risk factors and preventive factors. Now, the risk factors and preventive factors, those are definitions that we use. I studied and became a certified prevention specialist for the state of Michigan. And one of the things that they ask us to look at in situations of abuse, and especially abuse that deals with children, are risk factors and protective factors. So let's start out with some of the definitions of abuse. According to the CDC in Washington, there are 4 main types of abuse. They are physical abuse, and this is the intentional use of physical force that can result in physical injury. Examples are hitting, kicking, shaking, burning, or other shows of force against a child. The second is sexual abuse. It involves pressuring or forcing a child to engage in sexual acts, and this includes behaviors such as fondling, penetration, and exposing a child to other sexual activities. Emotional abuse. It refers to pressuring or behaviors that harm a child's self-worth or emotional well-being. And examples of this is name calling, shaming, rejecting, withholding love, and threatening. And as I'm sure you already know, with the emotional abuse, whether it's from family members or peers at school, we see more and more and more that the result of this can be suicide. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death among young people today. So emotional abuse is very important. And then there is neglect. Neglect is the failure to meet a child's need, the basic physical and emotional needs. These needs include housing, food, clothing, education, access to medical care, and having feelings of validation and being appropriately responded to. So as we look at these, let's look at some of the statistics. And these statistics come from the National Children's Alliance, a study that was done in 2020. The youngest children, number one, are the most vulnerable. And children in the first years of their life are 15% more victimized than other children. 1 in 40 infants under the year of 1 are victimized by abuse every year. Now, breaking down the abuse and demographics, girls are more victimized than boys at a higher rate of 8.9%, and the boys 7.9%. And as far as ethnic and race is concerned, American Indian and Alaska Native children have been the highest rate of victimization, while African American children come in close second. Abuse is deadly. In 2020, it was estimated that 1,750 children died from abuse and neglect, and that number went up to over 1,800 in 2021. Boys have a higher fatality rate than girls, and child fatalities are 3.1% greater in African American children. And so this has become a national tragedy. Nationally, neglect is the most common form of abuse. More than 75% of victims of abuse are neglected. So we can see that this is definitely a serious problem. Now, as we look at this, of course, we want to know, what can we do to help? And the first thing we need to do is look at the signs of abuse and neglect. For sexual abuse, some of the indicators for sexual abuse are genital injuries, bite marks, sexually transmitted diseases, soiled or wetting bed, sleep disturbance, inappropriate sexual behavior based on a child's age. You don't expect for a first grader or kindergartner to come in and make statements about sexual activities with accuracy. And so those are red flags. Promiscuity and excessive masturbation, obsessive and compulsive washing, and various types of contact with other people. These are all signs. Physical abuse. What are signs of physical abuse? Bruises in unlikely places like face, back, ears, hands, buttocks, upper thighs, and other soft places on the body. Inconsistent or absence from school. Bruising on a baby. Pressure marks from fingers on the face or chest. Bite marks and ligature marks. Welts. Skull fractures. Bleeding, multiple fractures, and suspicious burns, poisoning, or significant over medication. And we know in the news just recently, a baby died from being overly medicated. What about emotional abuse? What are some signs that we can look at for emotional abuse? Well, first of all, avoiding home. I saw that a lot while I was teaching. There were certain children who they just did not want to go home. Running away or continually staying at a friend's house. Fear of the dark or not wanting to go to bed. Lying or stealing. A lack of trust in adults. Poor self-esteem, poor academic performance, poor peer relationships. And these are not always the only ones. But if you see these in a combination, it certainly should send a red flag. Secretive or demanding and disruptive behavior. And what about neglect? What are some signs of neglect? Failure to thrive. And I felt like that was a very interesting one. If you know of a child who is just not thriving, please take a closer look. Developmental delays, a child that's prone to illness, shallow or sickly appearance, abnormally high appetite, stealing or hoarding food. These are all signs of neglect, possible signs of neglect. Having a dirty or smelly appearance, having untreated medical conditions, poor appearance, health and developmental problems, even anemia, housing and family issues, living in unsuitable home environments, such as having no heat, and a change in behavior, becoming more and more clingy. Now, these are just some of the signs, some signs of abuse and neglect. But there are also what we call risk factors. And when I went back and studied and became a certified prevention specialist for the state of Michigan. And as we were taking our courses and becoming certified as prevention specialists, one of the things that they insisted that we learn about is risk factors and preventive factors. There are things that can cause risk of abuse, and then there are things that can help prevent abuse. So let's look at some of the risk factors very quickly. Individual risk factors. Caregivers with drug or alcohol issues can be a risk factor. Mental health issues of caregivers, including depression. Caregivers who don't understand children's needs or development. And that one I'm going to come back to. Caregivers who are themselves abused or neglected. Caregivers who are young and just don't know about parenting skills. Caregivers with high levels of parental stress or economic stress. Caregivers who only believe in corporal punishment. And I'm going to come back to that too. Caregivers whose homes are not, the children are in homes who are not their biological parent. And then caregivers who have attitudes of accepting or justifying violence in the home. These are some risk factors that we can look out for. Now, I said I would go back to development. I know that when we were when we were first had children, and years ago we used to hear it, the terrible twos. And I remember when I first started teaching, that was one of the issues that it just seemed like it was constantly a conversation with parents, the terrible twos. And I had to explain a lot of times that we need to shift from that paradigm. We need to stop considering children who are between the ages of 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 as having the terrible twos. Because what actually is happening is this is normal development. These children are going through ages and stages of development where there is exploration. They need to touch things. They need to go around and explore things. They need to understand what it means to touch this or use that or even knock over this, because a part of this is problem solving. But when a child is not allowed to go through natural development, then they tend to stop, be halted in that area. And so when I see a child who is not able to do some of the normal developmental things, it certainly makes me wonder, where did this development stop? So one of the things that we used to talk about is not viewing some of the ages and stages as a negative, but look at it as a positive. Instead of calling it terrible twos, well, how about we call it terrific twos, where now your child is going through a stage of exploration, and we can be helpful with that and not try to stop it. And also a lot of the conversation in the Strengthening Families program. This is a program developing parental skills. A lot of the conversation was based around punishment and the need to understand, I'm sorry, the need to understand that our children are little sponges. And if the only way that they can see that, you handle situations is through violence, that's what you're teaching them. Example, if every time they act up, you hit them or smack them or push them or yell at them, if we do that, then when they get to school and they have a problem, how are they going to solve that problem? Of course, pushing, hitting, slapping, or calling names. Who did they learn that from? Because remember now, we are their first and most important teachers. So we find that in abusive situations, a lot of times hurt people hurt people. And we don't want to bring our children up teaching them that the way to solve a problem is to hurt. So please keep that in mind. Let's look at some risk factors that deal with the family. Family members who are in jail or prison. Family members who are isolated or not connected with other family members. Family members who have experienced different types of violence. And family members with conflict or negative communication styles. These are risk factors. What about community risk factors? Communities that have a high rate of violence or crime, or a high rate of poverty. These are often communities that have high risk factors. Communities that have a high risk for alcohol or drug abuse, or high risk of negative activities with gangs. These are all community risk factors. Now, it's important to understand that we also have preventive factors. Thank you, Lord. So what are some of the preventive factors? These are things that we can do. These are things that we can teach one another, and these are things that we can teach into our children. Number one, create a safe and positive relationship with children. Whether you are their parent, their teacher, their guardian, someone at church that they look up to or admire. You might be the usher, you may be the youth leader, or you're just that nice person that sits on the same row of that young person. Just by showing them positive interactions and relationships, you can change the trajectory of that child's life. What are other ways that we can present preventive factors? Being nurturing, provide emotional support, keep our eyes open for when we need to provide food or shelter or education or health services. And again, we can do this even as church members, as community members, as group members, as club members. We can keep our eye on these things and provide them. Family protective factors are positive relationships within the family, showing interest in the children and enforcing household rules that engage in monitoring, but not violence. We can serve as role models and mentors. And again, remember, we are the children's first and most important teachers. Even before they go to school, we've all have already taught them a wealth of things that have to do with life, prosperity, goodness, justice, love, loving themselves as well as loving others. That comes from what we have taught them long before they reach school. What are some community preventive factors that we can supply? Stable environments, places where the children can go to feel safe and nurtured. And I keep going back to church, clubs, even being that person on the block that the children come and play in front of your house because they know it's safe and they know that you'll give them good advice. Work opportunities for family using friendly practices and policies. everything that we can do pro-family is going to help with this tragedy. So after decades of research, we find that these different forms of abuse and neglect are interchanged. A lot of times when you find one form of abuse or neglect, you'll find more than one. So we want to be cognizant of that. And we want to know, what can we do to help? Again, first thing we need to do is to understand that violence is taught. Babies do not come out of the womb hurting other babies. They do not come out of the womb hating and doing things that hurt other people. These are learned behaviors. And so we, as responsible adults, have to teach our children how to be responsible children, loving children, kind children. We have to teach them that when there is a problem, that they can solve problems without resorting to violence, without resorting to hatred, without resorting to hurt. We have to teach them to love themselves as well as loving others, because we know the Bible tells us that one of the primary commandments that we were given was to love our neighbor as ourselves. But think about that. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And if we can't love ourselves, we'll never be able to love other people. So we must teach our children how to love themselves as well as love other people. Now, this was a quick and incomplete look at child abuse and neglect, and I hope that this will provide enough information that it causes you to want to dig a little deeper and look into what you can do to help to solve this tragedy. Thank you.
Wow, awesome. Before, again, we're going to hold our questions until after we have Anita Norsworthy, Bill Norsworthy do her presentation, and then we will ask questions. So hope you still have your pencil and paper so that you are remembering the questions that you want to ask, because it's important that today you get some of the answers that might help you to be that go-to person that helps to prevent child abuse and neglect. Anita, we're ready for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pastor Sharon, too, for that wonderful, wonderful information that we all can use. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I have a PowerPoint that I was able to kind of get together and show on today. Okay, so I am bringing the autism portion of our segment today, and I want to just thank the sister, but getting all of this together because it's much needed. As we all know, April is set aside for Autism Awareness Month. And I will definitely say the more opportunities that we take to educate ourselves around these different aspects, child abuse, autism, mental health, any of those segments that we can come in and be a part of to educate one another is going to be awesome. Education is powerful. Knowledge is power. The word tells us that we perish because of the lack of knowledge. So it's always good to come in and be a part of these forums where we are actually educating ourselves. So on today, for about the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to look at autism, and hopefully there will be something that'll be presented here that will kind of raise the awareness with this. We're going to look at a scenario on our next slide, and then we're going to look at some family talk. These are some things that out on the websites and stuff that I just kind of pulled together that I thought would be definitely helpful for us today. And then we're going to look at how autism is so closely related to ADHD. And we're going to kind of look at how maybe autism go underdiagnosed in that area. And then we're going to look at what autism actually is. We're going to look at some signs of autism, and we're going to look how it interferes with the person socially. And then I'm going to tell you what we can do as far as seeking help in that area. If we know someone with autism. Now, let me just start and give you just a little bit of numbers. CDC has reported that 1 in 36 children has been identified with autism spectrum disorder. ASD, short form, is reported to occur in all racial, ethics, and social economics. So it does not discriminate where it can show up at. ASD is nearly 4 times more among boys than girls, and kind of want to discuss that in our questioning area. Why do you think that is showing up more in boys than girl? Lastly, with statistics, about 1 in 6 ages 3 to 17 has been diagnosed with a developmental disabling disorder. So kind of wanted to bring those stats there to you this morning. All right, so moving right forward, this is a scenario, and we're going to definitely talk about this in our question and answer pile-up, but I kind of want you to kind of keep it in your mind as we go through the next couple of slides. So up here at the top, it says, Christians, what would you do? So each Sunday, Miss Tuesday Wednesday, new to the area, shows up with her 3 kids to church. They are usually late due to various issues at home. The choir starts singing, and immediately little March, age 5, gets very agitated, screaming, fighting with mom, and becomes very uncontrollable. This has happened for the last 4 Sundays. So kind of want you to keep that scenario in your mind, and we're going to come back to it in our question and wrap up, because Miss Anita and I'm sure others would want to know, what do you do? How do we handle that? And although this is a church setting, we could be facing this same setting in a grocery store setting or a shopping mall area. Want to know what our response to this would be. So just kind of hold on to that scenario there, and we'll come back to it at the end of the presentation. So the next thing I have here is family talks, and I found this out on the internet, and it was so fitting for the presentation today. And this just kind of lets you know what families give up, adjustments that they have to make when there is a child in the home that has been diagnosed with autism. So this first one says, my son has taken a stranger's food right off his plate. What could I possibly say to apologize? So hold that thought, because we have actually probably been in venues where we've seen that happen, and in our mind, we're probably saying, now, I just can't believe that She sat there and let him do that. Okay. So just kind of keep that one in your mind. Another family talk. I don't know the last time I've actually seen the end of the movie because of the crowds, the sounds, and lights. It just gets too difficult and we have to pack up and leave. When we go to the supermarket, so many people roll their eyes and start whispering. When we have to stand in a long line, she starts making noises and grabbing stuff. So now I just avoid taking her in public place in the public. Simple situation like haircuts, grocery shopping, and community gatherings are not so simple at all. So these families really have to work, choose their time when they're actually getting out. Probably don't get out a whole lot. Um, in these areas, and especially if you're in rural areas like I am in, there's not a whole lot of respite. Situations where people could come over and kind of give you a break, where you can actually go out and do some of the things that you need to do. I don't want sympathy or pity like, oh, I'm sorry. What I do need is for people to be patient, kind, and understanding. So the next time when we're in that grocery line and we see maybe an uncontrollable child and a parent is really, really struggling, don't be too quick to judge, what's going on there. So I kind of wanted to bring that to our attention as well today. So let's keep moving forward. I told you that I wanted to share how autism and ADHD kind of resembles one another. And to me, in being in mental health, I can see how autism kind of get put on the back burner, but ADHD becomes that diagnosis that most mental health professionals tend to go with. So is it autism or is it ADHD? They both share some of the same symptoms, some of the same signs and symptoms: impulsivity, lack of focus, difficulty organizing tasks and projects, social challenges, sensory issues, and emotional immaturity. So, all of these are signs of autism, and all of these are signs of ADHD. So that's why a lot of the numbers, when I was looking at the CDC numbers, I wonder if that number should be higher when it says 1 in 36 children has been diagnosed with autism. Could it be that a child that was diagnosed with ADHD could actually be struggling with autism? On that autism spectrum. So I kind of wanted to bring this to our awareness to show you how these two diagnoses tend to resemble one another. Now, when you're on kind of dealing with autism, that does require a little bit more extensive treatment options, more testing and stuff like that. And a lot of times, families just need to know, okay, I need for my child to maintain in a school setting. So therefore you look at ADHD. That's kind of quick. You can kind of quickly medicate that, where the child can maintain in the educational setting, church setting, public setting, and all of that. But is it really ADHD, or could we be kind of dealing with some autism here on that? So kind of wanted to bring that to your awareness on today. So right along, let's look at what actually is autism. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disability. Children and adults with autism have difference with social communication, interaction, and exhibit restrictive and or repetitive patterns of behaviors. So with that repetitive patterns of behavior, that could be more of a rock, things that become so repetition for them. They don't like that to break that chain of repetitive patterns of behaviors. There is a wide range of ability among people with autism. Some people with autism need significant levels of support to ensure their health and well-being, while others do not. So there are different levels of autism. There are some autistic kids that can actually be kind of maintained at home. There are some autistic kids where the parents have to seek extra help to maybe come into the home and to manage them in the home setting, school setting, and other areas like that. There is no known cause for autism and no singular form of assistance for autism. So there's no known cause of it. So like I said, it doesn't discriminate. It can actually happen to any person, but it's usually diagnosed at that early age. So this is the definition of autism. It is a developmental disability. So next, let's look at some signs of autism. We're going to look at the social, and then we're going to look at the restrictive, repetitive behavior. I can't say that word today. But let's look at the social communication and interaction. So difficulty establishing or maintaining back and forth conversation and interaction. So that's very difficult for a person that is struggling in that area of autism. Inability to initiate an interaction. So these individuals are not going to just automatically come up and initiate a conversation or interaction with you. These would be your babies at school that you will kind of see kind of playing off by themselves. They play better when they're alone. So inability to initiate an interaction. Difficulty with shared attention or sharing of emotions or interests with others. And I strongly can say that they just don't know how to share that or what to share. It's kind of hard for them to let you know how they are feeling. Atypical eye contact, person with autism, they are rarely going to look at you straight in the eye. Their eye gesture is usually off, or they're usually kind of looking down. Facial expressions, tone of voice, and gestures, as well as an inability to understand these. So it's hard for them to even understand us when we're doing facial expressions. It's hard for them to understand, because we can give a look and we can understand if that look is a worried look or a happy look or an excited look. But for a person with autism, it's kind of hard for them to distinguish that. They have a lack of interest in other people. They just like to kind of be in their own world. They're not interested in maybe going to the movies or hanging out at the park and stuff like that. They don't have that interest in other people. Difficulties in pretend play. A lot of young kids you will see have their imaginary playtime and stuff. They have difficulty with that. Engaging in age-appropriate social activities, that's a struggle for them, and challenges adjusting to different social expectations. So as you see these babies get older, you'll see it being more difficult as far as adjusting in certain venues. When they get over into junior high, the bell ringing and changing classes and stuff like that, that becomes a challenge to them. So let's look at the restrictive and repeated behaviors. So stereotyped and repetitive speech, motor movement, or use of objects. Usually autistic kids, they will kind of gravitate to maybe one particular object. It may be a stuffed animal or a bear or something hard that they can just kind of hold on to. Excessive adherence to routine, rich, ritualistic patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior, excessive resistance to change. And this to me is one of the big signs, especially when you're looking at even in Head Start, when they're having to transition from one station to the next. Is hard for them. You'll see them hard for them to adjust from going from playtime to maybe table time. They're just resistance with that change. If they're used to an 8 o'clock bed schedule and something happens that you're running late and you're not getting in bed till 9 or 10, you may kind of see an increase in behaviors with that resistance to change. Highly restricted interests that are atypical in intensity or focus, hyper or hyporeactive to sensory input, or unique interest in sensory aspects of the environment. So there's that hyper and hyporeactivity, and those are some of the things that you get with ADHD. So that can kind of help, does not help with, when you're looking at autism compared to ADHD, because they're kind of similar in those areas. Also, social interaction different. The way this affected person can vary and can include difference in the use and understanding of building and sustaining relationship. That's just a struggle that they have, building and sustaining those relationships, engaging in conversation, giving and receiving compliments. It's just something, as we forementioned in the last slide, understanding humor. They're just not going to, when it's a time to laugh, you may not see them being as joyful and excited as someone else is. Showing concern for others. I mean, they, as we stated on the last screen, they just don't take an interest in other people. So autistic kids are sometimes not that loving, cuddly person that you will see in someone that is that does not carry the diagnosis of autism. So moving right along, what can we do? How can we seek help if there are some concerns that that someone may be struggling here in this area? Early detection is key. Early detection. I always like to just give kudos to our Head Start department, because now Head Start can actually take babies in at least at 1 month of age. They can get these babies in, and therefore they're watching them as they grow. Teachers there are becoming more and more aware of different things that can actually be affecting our youth today. So starting them out in education and things is always the big key to that. So early recognition, and the way we recognize that, because we as families, sometimes we can be in denial. We can see these things, but yet again, we don't see it. But putting them in areas and venues where other people are knowledgeable in the developmental stages of our baby is definitely key. I was thinking when Pastor Sharon was actually talking about caregivers who just don't know what to do when situations and stuff arise. And when you look at a child that's even on autism spectrum and some of the behaviors that comes with that. And without the knowledge base, you can easily find yourself in this discipline role when actually there is something else going on there. So education is definitely very important. And even if you don't suspect autism, parents definitely need to be educated about the developmental levels of their child. And I heard Pastor Sharon talk about that parents are getting younger and younger. So it's very good to bring these platforms and these awareness so that we can all have the knowledge base. So the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends screening every child for autism at their 18th and 24-month checkup. Autism is diagnosed by a medical doctor, usually by a developmental pediatrician, pediatric neurologist, or team of developmental specialists. Early recognition, education, family therapy, applied behavioral analysis, and behavioral therapy is usually for ongoing treatment of autism. Moving right along, although there is no cure for autism, it can be treated so that the symptoms are not disabling. A nonverbal child can gain the ability to communicate. A non-social child can gain interaction skill. With treatment, children with autism are not cured, but can overcome the disabling aspects of the condition. Now, next thing we want to talk about is how can I help? How can I help a person that has been diagnosed with autism? So glad you asked. Being aware of autism and the different experience by autistic people is key. So knowledge, once again, is power. Ask the autistic person, care, or seek advice from others. Be understanding. People with autism have a lot to offer, but may need just a little support. Consider how you can adapt the environment to decrease sensory issues, such as decreased noise, dimming light, find a quiet space. Adapt your communication style. So if you're this from your communication style, some people just have loud tones. So you may want to adapt your communication style and maybe just kind of tone it down when you're in the venue of someone that has autism. Communication, adapting your communication can help an autistic person. So speak slowly and clearly. Don't use idioms or metaphors. Allow time for the person to process the information, process what you're saying. Keep instructions short, very short and simple. And lastly, avoid relying on gestures, face expressions, or tone of voice. So how can we help individuals? So if you know that you're in the venue of someone that may have some, maybe struggling with some autism, these are some things that we can do to kind of help their stay or their visit be pleasant. The next little thing, I had a little short video that I want to show, but you can actually find that video on YouTube. I don't know if I would actually have time to show that. I think it was about 3 or 4 minutes. It was about a mom who discovered that her 3-year-old was kind of having just a little bit of difference. But she was talking about in the African American area communities, it was just hard for her to find help. But because she had the knowledge base of being a teacher, she was able to kind of put some things into work. But I often think about the individuals that don't have that knowledge base or have not been educated in this area. So this is why awareness is so important, to bring awareness. Even though you may not have no one that you're directly connected to that is struggling here in this area, you can actually be a help to someone that may have some questions about autism. And that concludes my presentation on autism. And once again, I want to thank you all for allowing me to share this moment with you.
Oh, wow. We have definitely been given a lot of knowledge today. As I told you, these are two dynamic and awesome women, and they certainly are very knowledgeable in their field. And so again, we want to thank them for coming. And we are running kind of late. I do want to apologize for for Sharon Sadler. She had an urgent family matter and had to rush to take her mom to the hospital. So please keep her in your prayers, and her mom. So what we'll do right quick is we'll open up and take a couple of questions.
Okay.
If you have any questions on social media, please let us know what they are. Duke?
I'm checking social media now.
Okay.
While we're waiting for that, if any of the attendees have a question, they're more than welcome to unmute their mic at this time.
I will say that both ladies did a very thorough job. So if we don't have any questions, we have any comments that anybody would like to share?
This is Pat. No questions, but both of the presentations were super. They were great. I did get a little emotional during the first one because, listening to the statistics and the entire presentation, it just really broke my heart to know. We know that child abuse and child neglect, all of this is going on, but to see how extensive it is, it's just heartbreaking.
Yes, I agree.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay, well, we don't have any other questions. What we're going to do is we're going to thank everyone for joining us today. We certainly hope that this information that was shared increased your awareness of the situation and some knowledge about how we can be a help and be a part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. And so if you have other questions or later on, please don't hesitate to contact us, because we will be able to reach out to these ladies. And you can always put your questions on our website. And our websites, you can learn about us at www.oakhillregionalcdc.com and www.healthykidsmississippi.org. Again, that's www.oakhillregionalcdc.com and www.healthykidsmississippi.org. So we want to again to remind you that April the 24th at 6 p.m. is our Ask Mary and Pat, and they're talking about issues that involve Medicaid or sometimes the other insurances. So you can reach out to them and join them on April 24th at 6 p.m. And then our next third Wednesday parent resource chat will be Wednesday, May 17th, and we'll be talking about mental health and faith. So we invite you to join us at that time. Once again, we acknowledge our board chairs, Jennifer Garrett, and our executive director, Dr. Michael O. Minor. This has been a production of the Oak Hill Regional Community Development Corporation, belonging, building, and bridging in the Mid-South region and across the state of Mississippi. Again, thank you for joining us. And those of you who are on Zoom, stick around for a few minutes if you can.